All right, record to the cloud. Okay. All right. My brand managers, our final class of the semester. I thought it made a lot of sense since special speakers have been one of the features of this semester. I could think of no better special speaker to be the final special speaker of the semester than my friend Marc. He and his friend Vasilios, I call him because I don't know
Yeah,
how to
B.
pronounce a Greek name so hot. They have a phenomenal podcast, Sleeping Barber. Some of the most impactful marketers in the world have been guests on this program, and I love it. I highly recommend it. And the hat he's got on is the program. And so
Yeah.
I want to turn it over to Marc to teach us about real world branding, marketing, and launching careers. Take it away, my friend.
Thanks, Tom. Really nice to meet you guys. I've got you on this screen, and then I got my presentation on that screen. So I'm going to be kind of looking back and forth, and my camera's up there. So I'll keep an eye on it. You guys feel free to jump in and ask questions as we go through this. Make this as interactive as you want. Happy to answer, like I said, anything that comes to mind for you. So like just interrupt me at any point. Don't worry about offending me. Um, so again, yeah, thanks, Tom. I'm really excited to be here and do this presentation for you guys and have this conversation with you all. So this is branding and marketing in the real world, and I try to think of a bunch of stories that I had in my career to kind of illustrate a few points. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I'd say if there's one thing when it comes to branding, I think this is true probably more and more the more I think about what is a brand. It's ultimately somebody making a promise and then delivering. And so you just do that promise, deliver, repeat, promise, deliver, repeat, promise, deliver, repeat. It sounds really simple, but from a company perspective, it's way harder than you think. And so it applies to individuals, but I think it applies to companies equally importantly. Um, and I don't know that it's that much more complicated than that. So just one thought for anybody that wants to kind of just chew on that and then zone out, feel free. Left you with a gift. But for everyone else, I've got this agenda. We're going to go through sort of these 6 things. I have a story about showing up, story about big M versus small M marketing, talk a little bit about obsession with lampposts, a thing around language, AI, of course, and then career tips. Sound good? Cool. All right. So the story about showing up, my first job out of university, I had a science degree. I thought I was going to be a doctor and then found out that you need good marks to get into med school. So that kind of door shut on me. But I really like science. And I had an uncle at the time that worked for a pharmaceutical company. And so he was like, I met, he was like the fleet services manager. He's like, I met a whole bunch of pharma reps in my time there. And he had recently retired. He's like, why don't you go meet this guy that I know? And he lived 45 minutes away. And so in the middle of winter, I drove out to meet this guy. He invited me to drive out and meet him. And so after, like, I barely got out of my car, and the guy had greeted me outside, and was really welcoming, and got me a coffee. And almost before we even said anything else, he was already on the phone reaching out to people that he knew, asking them if they had any job openings, because he had this really ambitious young guy sitting in front of him, and he thought it'd be great for me to meet them. And I was sitting there trying to figure out, like, how the fuck did he know anything about my ambition? I just showed up. And so for a long time, it was really confusing to me. I was super appreciative, obviously, of the effort this guy went to putting himself on the line and all that kind of stuff. But the thing that was really compelling to me is, as I got older and older in my career and further on in my career and started hiring people, there's a lot of people that never show up. Like, it's shocking to me how many interviews I've scheduled with people and people don't show up to the interview. It's crazy. And equally as important is, like, I've got a job description and they've never read it. Like, it blows my mind that I ask them questions that are specifically in the job description and they can't answer it. So I think, as simple as it sounds, showing up is a superpower for all of you. Like just going and driving that 45 minutes in the middle of winter to that interview is worth it, because a lot of people won't. So don't self-select out is the key message there. And in a way, it's like that thing around the make a promise, deliver, I was saying. So I made a promise that I was going to show up at this guy's house, and then I did. And so you earn a reputation when you do that. And so the reputation is one thing, and an individual, the more people you do that with, the more of that reputation you earn. But if you keep doing it over and over and over again, then you become a brand. And so that really is kind of a thing. And whether I've known it or not throughout my career, I kind of feel like I've started building a brand, or not started, but I started a long time ago building a brand, not really knowing that's what I was doing. And so for me, because of my science background, I was always interested in how things work and the academic literature. And literally when I was in pharma, like that's how we learned how to do things. And how we learned what the stuff that we were selling, how it worked, was through pharmaceutical placebo-controlled, randomized controlled trials. And I got really used to reading the academic journals for medicine. And so that was just a common way of learning for me. And so when I went into advertising and marketing, my training was first, here's the phone book. There's a phone. If anybody asks, use the rule of 3 to build out a schedule on how many ads you need to run in a week, and go. And that was all the training I had. So I started asking all kinds of questions, like, how does advertising work? And people gave me really kind of fluffy answers. Like, how do you measure it? And people gave me really fluffy answers. So I just went to the literature, assuming that there would probably be literature in advertising and marketing and some science around it. And it turns out there's a ton of it. And so for, I don't know, 20-ish years, I've been kind of trying to build my brand that way also, just to find out, how does this stuff work? How does it actually deliver returns? Does it do the things it says it does compared to what everybody believes it does? And so there's all kinds of evidence here, and you guys are learning a lot of it because I saw your curriculum, which is great. And so I'd say you can choose whichever path you want, but like a bit of consistency over time will help you build great brands, not only for yourselves, but for your companies that you might be working for. Anyone have any questions about that or any thoughts?
I will add, showing up is 80% of life, somebody has once said, and it's so true.
Yeah. 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 It's a huge step. Like, it's crazy how, like, it sounds so simple, but it's really hard
But
for some
I think
people.
what you just said, as well as how to build a personal brand. I'm not a big fan of building my personal brand, but if you do something right over time, that's a reputation and that's a brand.
Yeah. Yeah. And then when it comes to businesses, I would say there's a huge differentiator. And I make the distinction, when you're building a brand, between small brand and small end marketing and big end marketing, in the sense that, for the most part, in the marketing departments, most marketing departments I've been involved in, and I know it varies from organization to organization, but a lot of marketing departments are really focused on small M marketing, meaning they primarily work on advertising, which is only one of the 4 Ps. So price, product, place, promotion. But big M marketing is those 4 Ps. And so I make the distinction because that's where it becomes really hard for companies to do this. It's really easy for a brand to put up an ad and say, we're the best, or we're the number one, or we're like America's favorite, or, pick any number, like we save the whales, all that kind of stuff, right? But then way harder to actually deliver that when it comes down to, okay, can you do it at the price that people are willing to pay, and a profitable price for yourselves, that you have the product that supports those claims, and that you have the place, in other words, the distribution channels that make it so that they can get it when they need it in different ways that they want to get it. And so that's where the complexity comes in, and that's where it becomes so hard. And there's all kinds of really interesting, compelling evidence and research around this. One of them is called The Promise of the Customer. There's a couple of reports on that, from the B2B Institute. that look at both B2C categories and B2B categories. And when you make a promise to the customer in an ad, and there's a definition around that, but companies that do that really well outperform companies that don't do it really well. And part of the reason why they are outperform the companies that don't do it well is because they've figured out the big M marketing. So they make a promise, but then they also deliver on that promise. And so that's the really hard part that takes time for brands. And that's why I'm saying the consistency over time is really important. So here's a quick story about that. I used to work at a company that's kind of like Dick's Sporting Goods. Do you guys know Dick's Sporting Goods?
We got him. We got him here.
Yeah. So there was a company in Canada that was the biggest at the time. I think it still is probably the biggest sporting goods retailer in Canada. And so there's this story that we had. So I was in the marketing side, and it was at a time when e-com was a relatively new thing. Like it used to just be all stores, and then there was e-com, and then we were going from this print flyer based history and culture to more digital based history and culture, and trying to redefine the rules of how advertising worked and how retail in-store sales could be impacted by digital ads. Sounds simple, but then it was really complicated. And so one of the things that happened was we started seeing that the sales in shoes were going down, and shoes for $1 billion company, which is what we were at the time. Shoes made up about half of the sales. And so for the sales to be going down in shoes was a big problem. And what the first instinct was for a lot of people in the business was to point the finger at the marketing department, because we were doing a lot of digital advertising, which isn't print, obviously. It isn't showing up in people's mailboxes or on the doorsteps and that kind of stuff. And then there's this direct line of attribution between a digital ad that we kept talking about and an online sale. The online sale was not attributed to a store. It was accounted for in an online store. So the online store was its own store. And so what happened was a lot of people started pointing fingers going, you're stealing our sales, and that's why sales are going down from the store level. And so this went on for a long time. We ate a lot of shit and we got in a lot of trouble. And then eventually got around to the point where we realized after months and months of investigation that there was a decision made by the store operations people to cut the staffing model, or the staffing model, so that there were fewer staff at the shoe wall. And so I don't know if any of you guys have tried to buy, anybody have bought shoes, by the way, like recently at a store like this? Just put up your hand or nod, something. Yeah, it's a couple of people. So as you know, like you can't actually get shoes if there's not a person at the store, at the wall, to get the shoes for you. They won't let you in the back unless it's one of those places where the shoes are just laid out in front of you. So that ended up becoming the problem. It was the bottleneck. It had nothing to do with the ads. It had nothing. There was all kinds of stuff that we uncovered, but it had everything to do with the store model itself and the way they staffed the store. And so it took a long time to get to that point, but like thankfully we did. And so there's a lot of insights and lessons on that. So when we're talking about building a brand, like if we're saying we can have, you can get any kind of shoe you want, like whatever these ones are here. The one with the pink, what are those, Reeboks? The bottom shelf, sure, it's visibly available, but if it's not physically available, like nobody can go get it, that's a portion of physical availability. And so it's a problem. And so it has nothing to do with marketing. One of the problems also with marketing, and I'm saying marketing now, I mean more small M marketing, but we often do things like say we're going to measure ROI and we want to prove the return of a marketing investment. And so this is a very common formula. So you go, okay, what's our sales minus the marketing cost divided by marketing costs? And so this is a really common formula that a lot of people use. The problem with it is that it assumes that all of the sales are because of marketing, like the marketing department. In other words, the advertising. And as I just was telling you about with the shoe wall story, sometimes it has nothing to do with the advertising and the marketing department. And in fact, after a bunch of time, there's a of me thinking about this. I did this article or post recently in the last couple of years anyway, where I went through and tried to figure out how many factors are there that affect ROI, and I could count at least 35 different factors that affect ROI. And so it is a real big problem when you do things like use a measurement like the ROI calculation that I said and showed you, because you assume that all the winning and losing is because of advertising. And it's incorrectly assuming that all of it is. And then so you either take credit for all of the blame, and so you set yourself up for failure, or you take credit for all of the success, which nobody will let you do. So you're in a lose-lose situation. So that it is a really big problem. So some of these tools that we choose to use, like I think we need to be honest with ourselves about what these tools do, and rather than just blindly using them, like what are we actually trying to say, and is it the right measurement to say it? When I was talking about the shoe wall, there's this mental model that's really well evident, researched, called mental and physical availability. You guys probably heard something about this in your courses and classes, but I really think this is such an important framework to think about. It does a much better job explaining growth than a lot of things. We'll talk about the funnel later. But it's really, really important. So if you think about it this way, the shoe wall idea, the advertising was telling people shoes were there. The store was telling people that you could buy it there, but it wasn't, and it might have been prominent in the case of that Reebok shoe that I was talking about, but it wasn't buyable because there was a problem with accessing that shoe. There wasn't staff there to get it. So this is where the complexity of growth comes into play, and why it's so hard for companies to become great brands. Because to make this all work is really, really like a cohesive, requires a lot of cohesion between different groups of people, different departments, and that kind of stuff to make it all work. And it's this idea of like Jamie Tart. Anybody seen Ted Lasso? Couple nods. No. Oh, it's such a good show. Sorry. So Gianna, I'm just looking at you shaking your head. You've never seen it. I don't know if anybody else. So it's a great show. There's this character in the show called Jamie Tart. And at the beginning of the series, he's this really selfish guy. He just cares about him. Everything's about his own stats. But the team is garbage. And so it's I think a good analogy for thinking about if you're interested in being in marketing and being in and having a career in marketing, don't be like a Jamie Tart is the message there. Later in his career, he realizes how important it is to do things like pass the ball to other people and to give people credit when credit is due. And eventually I don't want to spoiler alert, they end up as a great success story of the team. So, and his character is kind of an evolution of that story. So I think it's just a really good analogy, especially when it comes to advertising and marketing. Like, we're never always the source of success, and we're never always the source of failure either. And so be careful around what you're thinking about when you think about small M marketing versus big M marketing, and the tools that we're using to measure success. Any other thoughts or questions from anybody before we move on to the next one?
First of all, just so you know, a promise to the customer, Roger, Martin, and the B2B people, that we have that's in one of the weekly modules that we do, as well as you just mentioned tying marketing to ROI. There's a great post from the Marketing Accountability Council. I don't know, Mark, if you follow that, but definitely worth checking out, because they argue against making marketing be responsible just for revenue. Like you say, it's a team sport. And the last thing I'll say is taking a marketing plan out to the marketplace is where they always fall apart. The execution of the plan. So team game is an understatement.
Yeah, totally. Awesome. So, there we go. I can see more of you now. Okay, so this one's a story about a lamppost. There's a great line, or you probably heard it before, but there's this isn't a drunk guy, I don't think, and there's not a copier, but I couldn't find a better picture, so we'll use this one. So there's this great story about a guy who's drunk is standing under a lamppost and he's looking for his keys. And so a police officer comes by and he's like, "Hey, what are you doing here?" He's like, "I'm looking for my keys." He's like, "Hey, I don't see any here. Like, are you sure you lost them here?" He's like, "No, but this is where the light shines." And he's like, "Why do you look where the light, where your keys are?" So the reason I bring up that story is because there is so much data coming out of, it's like puking out of Google, and it's puking out of Meta, and it's puking out of Amazon, or all in TikTok and Snapchat and all these channels. It, by the second, it's just spewing data all the time. And so the problem is, a lot of times you're optimizing, changing, and doing things with the data that's there where the light shines, and not where the data, where it matters. You're not always looking for where the keys are, which is the business data. And so it's a huge, huge problem for a lot of organizations and a lot of companies, because they have, and I've worked for agencies that have, and I've hired agencies, and I've worked internally with teams, and for teams. And so it's a common problem across B2B, B2C, whether you're agency side, brand side, it's just a common problem. And so part of it is because the data is there. And so you go to where it's easy to find the data, not necessarily that where the right data is. And so one of the common problems with this is you have reports that come back all the time going, "Look at this. Our media is amazing. All these great results, like our CPMs have improved, our CPCs have improved, our cost per click, our cost per conversion, our cost per acquisition, or like whatever the things are that you're looking for." You go on the media side, we look at all this stuff I did to make improvements. And then you get in front of an executive team, and this has happened to me more than one occasion, and they go, "Yeah, but sales is down, dummy. I don't care what you're saying. And all you're doing is discrediting yourself by telling me that the media is up all the time." So this has been a thing that I've had more than on one occasion. And it's not a simple solution. It's not a simple fix. But I do think there are some things you can do. But you get to this point where you get in these like cycles where you go, it's like the Chris Rock joke, I take care of my kids. And then you're supposed to. Like, you're supposed to manage your media. You're supposed to do those things. You're supposed to make it better. That's fine. But don't expect like a pat on the back if sales for the organization aren't going up, or that you're not delivering whatever the business outcome is, like more market penetration or market share, or having profitability increase and that kind of stuff. So it's really important for marketers, and especially, to think about the data that's not always available to them. And if it is the sales data, then that's great. But calibrating the data from the dashboards that's puking out at you with the stuff that's coming from the business, because the business only ultimately cares about the business data. And so the takeaway there is, like, really we need to spend a lot more time measuring where the keys are, not necessarily where the light is. Anybody got any thoughts or questions?
Amen.
Okay. Anybody here read the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? I was thinking about this, and maybe you guys don't know this reference. It's funny. I used to be like, my kids tell me I'm so old now.
Yeah,
I'm,
it
I'm
was.
realizing that I'm
Yeah,
old.
I see a
Oh,
hand.
we got one person
Claudia's
that's read
hand went up. Claudia read
it.
it.
Nice. Okay, so the Hitchhiker's Guide to Galaxy is this book, well, a series of books, but there's this thing in the book where they talk about babblefish. So it's this weird story about intergalactic space travel and things like that, but it's more comedy than sci-fi. But the babblefish idea is that in order to speak from one person to another, or one being to another, they get this babblefish, they put it near, and then it's an automatic translator. And so, yeah, that's the idea here about watching your language. And so you guys probably, just show of hands, probably familiar with the funnel, the sales and marketing funnel. So a sales and marketing funnel is a really, really common model. And you guys have heard of it. It's really kind of shorthand for almost everybody in the advertising industry and the marketing world. Pretty much around the world, I would say, that they use the funnel and they know about the funnel. So the funnel is this idea of like people have the buyer goes through stages. So you have attention, interest, desire, and action. And so the funnel itself was developed in 1898 by a guy named Elmo St. Louis. Oh, I forget his name. Elias St. Elmo Lewis. That's it. And he is a sales guy. And so he was doing training, and he kind of, and at the time, this is like obviously a long time ago, like in over 100 years ago now, 130 years ago. But they would walk around and he was training people how to do door-to-door sales for things like a razor or like this new innovation that nobody had ever heard of before called a zipper, like stuff like that. And so it was a different time, a different era, different like tactic. And so he was trying to help salespeople become better. And so what they would do is go, okay, well, when you knock on the door, you got to make them aware of who you are. Like, oh, hey, I'm Marc. I'm a zipper sales guy. And then, so that's the awareness part. And then awareness interest would be something like, hey, you know that problem you have with the buttons, like they are always breaking off and popping off and that kind of stuff? Yeah, sure. Well, let me tell you about the solution I have. And so that's sort of interest. And then the desire part is, look at this new technology of a zipper. And I'm obviously not a zipper salesman, so you have to bear with me. This is not a great zipper, a perfect zipper sales pitch, but you get the idea. And then he gets the action where it's like, if you buy now, I'll throw in like this automated self-tippable hat while we're at it, and maybe also a brush or two from the Fuller Brush Company. But it's only available right now. I only got 5 left in my bag, and I know the neighbor down the road is going to want to buy one. So they already told me to come back. And so there's that sort of action part. And so that's where that model came from. And then about 20, 30 years later, in the early 1900s, it got adopted by early advertisers, and then it became the common tool. And the actual funnel part became part of that model, like the actual physical funnel part became part of that model. And it just got adopted by advertisers everywhere. And so there's a bunch of problems with the funnel. But one of the byproducts of the funnel is that we started using words like tofu, mofu, and bofu. Have you guys heard of that? Like, just nod. Top of funnel, middle funnel, bottom of funnel. So it's common language for a lot of advertisers and a lot of marketers. But most of the time, when you say that in front of an executive team or people in finance or anybody who's outside of marketing, they have no idea what you're talking about. Like, never mind the acronyms of tofu, mofu, and bofu. They have no idea what you're talking about when it comes to the funnel. And so one of the problems when we talk about watch your language and having a babble fish is that we have these tools that have become so common, we don't often think about where they came from. And so sales or marketing, advertising specifically, is not sales done over media. James Herman, if you're ever interested in reading a really cool book, he's got a couple of them, but that's a really good book. And he used that phrase in that book. But it really is true. Advertising is different than sales. And so we have these models, they're kind of helpful, but they're not right. And then the byproduct of them is they develop this language that we use and we adopt, and then we spread this language throughout the business. And then the problem is that everyone in the business doesn't have a clue what we're talking about. And then we end up sounding like the coloring department because we don't speak business. And so when you say things like mofu, bofu, and tofu, which I've done in an executive boardroom, people are like, I can't take you seriously. Like, you could just go make some pretty ads and like let the adults do the real work. And so there's this kind of like negative approach or negative response that comes from unintended from some of the stuff we're doing. And so one thing that I encourage you guys to do is think about the tools you use and the language you're using. there's a whole bunch of models. We talked about the mental and physical availability one before, but this is another version of that. This is called the cash flow funnel from the B2B Institute. Also rooted in a lot of good evidence and ideas. Part of what I like about this is that it's not so far off of a funnel that you can't relate to it for most marketing departments, but there's so many more improvements in it that I think it makes it a lot better in terms of explaining the buyer markets, and we won't go all into that today. But what it does allow you to do is say there's cash flow, and that's a very financially oriented term that almost everybody in business is going to have an understanding of. You might not as an advertiser, as a marketer, but that's important for you to learn that kind of language so you feel comfortable with it. And so what this does is basically it takes a look at the realities of any given market, and it'll say things like, when any given market, you're going to have a small percentage, in this case, a rule of thumb, it's not a law, but a rule of thumb is about 5% of all buyers in any given category are in market today, and about 95% are not. They're future buyers, but they're not in market today. And so then this becomes a really easy jumping off point to say current cash flow and future cash flow. And so when you're trying to position what you're doing as a advertiser or a marketer to say we're influencing sales today, current cash flow, and priming the market so that we get more than our fair share of future cash flows, it reframes the whole conversation. So then you don't say things like mofu, bofu, tofu, and then people just tell you to go make some more pretty pictures.
We use, yeah, Mark, just so you know, I use the cell phone example, show of hands. How many are going to buy a new cell phone in 5 years? Pretty much every hand goes up. How many are going to buy one in the next 5 weeks? One or two. So, yeah, we definitely love the 95-5 rule.
Yeah, and I use it all the time now with clients. And I talk about clients, but also the marketing association and things like that I've been working on. But I start with a funnel because most people know that is a common language, but then I transition it. I literally, like in slides, show it moving over into the side. And the other thing that's really important is it shows a time scale here. Because as we said before, there's a whole bunch of factors that happen outside of marketing. And the category dynamics is one of those factors. So how many people are buying on how many people are buying shoes on Black Friday versus say January 15th? It's a way different number. And so if we use language like all we need to do is drop a little tofu out there and it will bubble through the funnel to get, our more than our fair share of people at the bottom of the funnel, it sets up a set of expectations that we can't live up to. And so that's an important part, I think, about this. So the cash flow funnel, like I said, it's not just a model, it's a translator. And I think there's, as you guys may have heard some stuff about this already, but there's so much more happening in terms of conversations related to marketers speaking more financial language. It's just this growing swell of conversation that's happening. You can call it a trend, probably, but we need better tools to help us do that. And the cash flow funnel is one of those. Okay, AI. I'm happy to answer any kind of questions you guys might have on this section too. So there's this story, as the story goes, this is a pretty good one. Deloitte, giant company, global company. I don't know how many tens of billions of dollars they make a year, but it's a lot. They're huge. And so this has happened more than once to them. It's happened once in Canada, I know of, and once in Australia, at least, and probably happening more and more places. But they had to give a refund to one of their clients for a report they delivered that was published in it by AI. So nobody checked it, nobody did it. They sent it to the client, and the client was like, "Are you kidding me?" Like, it probably had all kinds of M dashes and lots of slop in there, and just all kinds of weird stuff that didn't make any sense, and nobody proofread it, I guess, to check to see whether it was valid. So that's a common thing. So as a starting point, I would say that it happens more often than it's talked about, probably. but this is constantly a thing. We talk about hallucinations a lot. Hannah, using AI for government report is crazy work. Yep. Well, I don't know that it's crazy work, but I think blindly accepting what it gives you is crazy. So there's lots of reasons we can talk about this. Here's how I think this happened. So you guys can do this. Actually, if any of you guys got like an AI tool handy, open on their desk, just raise your hand if you have like a ChatGPT or Gemini, or open one up right now. I'm just curious to see if this will hold up. We can do a little experiment together.
All right,
Give me a thumbs up when you have one open.
Somebody open up. Yeah, somebody put a thumbs up. You'll be our AI inspector.
We got one. Gianna, is that how you pronounce your name? Sorry.
Yes. Yeah.
Cool.
Gianna.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Gianna's got one. Anyone else got one? Okay, Hannah. Let's see one more hand go up, and then we'll start this. Anybody else got one up? ChatGPT, Gemini, Google, or Claude, anything? Grok. Okay. Anybody? I need one other hand. Just anyone else got it?
I opened Claude.
Okay. Let's try it, Tom. Okay, so give me a random number between 1 and 10. And then in the chat, or just yell out, what's the number that you get?
7. Hannah yells 7.
Okay. Gianna, what'd you get?
Wait, are we supposed to ask the AI that question? I wasn't following.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
What was the question, Mark? I didn't answer.
Yeah. Give me a random number between 1 and 10. Put it in the chat.
So we're using it as a prompt. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
That's not what I got then. I just made up a random number. Sorry. Hold on.
I got 7.
Okay. Tom, what'd you get?
7.
Yeah.
Kate got 7.
Okay. So that's what these guys got too. Okay. Now tell it, say, and then give me another number between 1 and 10.
Throw in 3.
Mine says 3 too.
Hannah, what'd you get? 4. Oh, wow. So this is Claude. This is ChatGPT. This is this private proprietary tool. That the reason they're doing this is to show that they get different answers. So just say one more and another.
To our GPTs.
Yeah, whichever one you're on.
9.
I got 9.
9.
Yeah. So this is the thing with a lot of these tools. They're predicting a very average number, like they're in this case, and then they do this for everything. They're picking the mode, like the thing that's in the middle. So it's smart. It knows all kinds of stuff. Like you guys have learned, like the cash flow funnel. If you ask it to tell you about the cash flow funnel, it knows about the cash flow funnel. But if you don't ask it that, it won't tell you that. So it'll do the thing like it's showing you with this AI tool here, which is it'll pick the mode. It'll pick the average. And that's part of the reason why I think that the Deloitte report was so bad. It sounds good. And it's because it's the average, which is what the average person is going to say, or what the average amount of data shows. And the reason they're picking this is because when you randomize this group of people pick numbers on these things, they pick 7, and then they pick 9, and then they pick 3, or 7, 3, and 9. And so what this tool is showing you is that it breaks the mold. It doesn't follow the patterns of the norm. It will try and randomize. It will look for the edges. And I think from your end, there's so much opportunity. Like I don't look at AI as like a problem. I look at it as an opportunity, because you guys are learning stuff in your course, whether you know it or not, that is not the norm. I looked at the course material. It's awesome. The stuff you're learning is great. It's so good and it's so important. It's evidence-based, which is like back to my science days I love. And you can lean on that. If you want to know like the average, if you just type into your AI tool, like give me an average or give me a marketing report, it will use something like the funnel and tell you, here's the tofu, here's the mofu, here's the bofu of like the plan and the strategy. But you don't necessarily want that. So I think it's to be inquisitive, to be thoughtful, to find something other than the average, to find the best possible answer, not just the most acceptable answer, is really important. So there's this great line from a guy named Dave Abbott, who's a former ad guy that ran a lot of agencies. He had this great line way back when, before AI was ever a thing. And I just think it's so relevant. It's probably more relevant today that shit delivered at the speed of light is still shit. And so AI can make us faster, but it's not necessarily making us better. It's just making us more average. And that, I think, is the advantage that, especially for you guys, you probably have an advantage that you're more willing to accept that AI is a tool you can use for your world, for your life, and for business and for work, and think of it in different ways than the ways people normally think about it. The training you're getting is going to be different. Like if you know all that going in, you can use it to your advantage. The one thing that I think is really critical is judgment. And you guys have probably seen stuff like this. It's about taste making is another way I've heard people describing it. Decision making, having a critical thinking lens, so you're not just accepting what AI is going to say, is really helpful. Some of the tools you guys have been learning, like the cash flow funnel, is a really great thing. Like, don't give AI all the tools and be the Deloitte. Don't outsource your thinking to it. You can use your thinking and critique and have it actually critique your own thinking or that of anyone else's. And so directing it, guiding it, telling it what you're looking for, telling it to contradict what you want, to get the inversion of what you are looking for, is like all kinds of real cool ways to use it. And again, when it comes back to the whole premise that we started with, like if a brand is really about making a promise and delivering, it's really a matter of like, what do you want to deliver? And then what's the promise you're making? And just keep doing that over and over and over again. And eventually you will build a brand as an individual, but it's the same way that companies build a brand for themselves as well. So that's my take on branding in the real world. Couple of tips for you guys just for starting your career. Again, I think making a promise, which is just really about showing up at the start, like really as simple as that. Show up for interviews, like put yourself out there. When you get a job or volunteer, like just raise your hand. Like a lot of times people just don't. And so there's huge opportunities for you just by doing that. Second one I would say is really the cash flow funnel, I think, is really critical. There's better mental models than the funnel. So like be careful when you pick a model. How are you using it? There's a whole thing around like whether the company accepts it or not. That's a different thing, but there are better mental models. Look past the lamppost light is another one. Like think about when you're talking about any kind of optimization, always think about the business optimization and the pace of change the business can accept versus the pace of change that the data is coming from you at digital channels, because the digital dashboards are changing by the second, but the business doesn't. So you got to think about the pace as well. Another one, like, do customers care? Like that really matters a lot. Like related to the the speed of light kind of thing. Just because you can do things faster doesn't mean that it's better. It just means you're doing things faster. And so being kind of critical, and the way in my mind from a brand perspective is to think about, do customers even care about this? Because most of the times the answer is they don't think about you, your company, nearly as much as you think about you and your company. And then the last one is, I think this is good advice too, that finding a mentor, not a guru. And guru I put into categories of like, there's Simon Sinek as an example. there's like these public personas, which is kind of like pop culture pablum. And that stuff is really enticing and encouraging. I've gone down the path of a lot of those in the past. The tricky part is there's a lot of stuff out there, and you've probably seen a whole bunch of ads of like, you can get I guarantee 1 million views, those kinds of views, or those kinds of ads and that kind of persona. Fine. Yeah. But it really is like more the guru style things. That's a here today, gone tomorrow kind of thing. I think it's better for your career and probably for the businesses you serve to find mentors. So people that have had scars, people that have done things wrong. You probably learn a lot more from them than you will from these people that seem to have all the answers and the special sauce and they know everything. And that's it.
Fantastic. So if you want to, first of all, you're going to answer any questions that we may have.
Yep.
I just want to touch on a few things here. Hannah has her hand raised, so let's let her to ask the first question.
I was
Hannah,
just
excuse
clapping,
me,
but
my bad.
I'm forming some questions, I think.
I will say, Mark, your thoughts on customer experience, because really at the end of the day, who's responsible for customer experience? Like the store. I think there's that not enough companies are focused on that. There's not one person who's looking at customer experience over everything. Would you agree with that, Mark? Disagree? What's your thoughts?
It's kind of like, so this is the winning as a team sport thing to me. Like, there are customer experience teams in organizations. Not often, in my experience, were they part of the marketing team. Marketing team's remit really is kind of focused on advertising for the most part. Sometimes, depending on the industry, they're related to product marketing, product development. Sometimes occasionally pricing, but for the most part, that kind of work is done by a customer success group. And so where I think the organization can win is by thinking about the promise to the customer work that you guys have, by the sounds of it, researched. So that's that promise, deliver, promise, deliver, promise, deliver. Like, everybody has to like understand what the promise is that the company is making. The marketing team is the one that puts that into the world through their paid ads and that kind of stuff. But it's up to the business to deliver on that. And customer service and customer experience, often not marketing's remit, like I said, but they're a part of making that promise real and building the brand. And so in that sense, it's everybody's responsibility to be clear about what we're doing and how we're doing on customer service. So that's the thing I would say.
Hannah, are you ready with your question now?
Yeah, I guess I have one question, but I don't really know how to ask it. So like you're saying, it's like a team effort. It's like it requires like cohesion throughout like the whole company. But like as a marketer, especially like a marketer going into the field, and not having like, I don't know, not having as much of a say in the company, like how do you even get to that point where like everyone's over? Like, is it more of like a slow process, or like what are your advice? What's your advice?
Yeah, a lot of it depends on I think the size of the company is one thing. So what marketers often are in control of is the ads. That's almost a given for the most part. And so I think the one tool that marketers use a lot, but there's always room for improvement, is the brief. And the brief on what we're going to do with the campaign and why we're doing it and what the objectives are and all that kind of stuff. The brief is really critical. In my mind, it's probably the most important document that an advertising department or a marketing department owns, because it's essentially lining up what they're wanting to say in an ad with the promise that they have to deliver with a business outcome. And so in that brief, if you think about it like a contract, there's a bunch of things you're agreeing to, and a bunch of things that you were saying are inside of our scope as the marketing department, and there's codependence of like, we need these groups to do this and this and this. And it's almost like a way of saying, well, if in order for this to be true, for us to hit these revenue objectives and these profit margins and that we're targeting and this, whatever the business outcomes are, then we need all these groups to work together. And so for me, the brief is so critical because it literally spells out all those things. And so that becomes more and more and more important as the company gets bigger, because there's more and more people involved and more stakeholders involved. And so getting everybody aligned on the brief is up front is awesome. In smaller companies, it's not that you don't do a brief, but it becomes less formal, and it becomes more something that happens probably ad hoc kind of thing. And so the brief might be more like an annual strategic plan kind of thing on what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. And so you kind of operate on the fly a bit more maybe in a smaller company. But yeah, that's how I think you can, as a marketing team and a marketing department, you can spell out like, here's our set of responsibilities. Here's things that are in scope for us. Here's things that are out of scope for us. Here's all the factors that contribute to ROI. When you ask us at the end of this, did we succeed? I'll say, well, yes, the advertising portion did because of this, and this. But here's the other things we need to check on, whether you have the data or not. Here's the other things we need to check on to find out if the win or loss was a result of marketing. And it's probably almost never a result of just the marketing.
One thing you can do, Hannah, as a young marketer coming into a business, is become an expert on customers. Talk to customers up and down the channel, because you'll find out internally. Michael Porter wrote an article about what do CEOs do. Only 5% spend time with customers. And trust me, the more you get up in the organization, I feel the less. And so a young marketer that is tied into the market, to the customers, to the drivers, they'll listen to you. Doesn't matter how many years you're in there, because there's not enough people that are talking to customers. So I would give that advice. Make that part of your job.
Yeah, that's a great tip. I'd also say things like synthetic surveys are awesome. Like you would probably feel more comfortable doing that than somebody who's like 20 years into their career. And so in that case, you're still getting average data because it's the mode, the mean. You're still getting the 7, the 3, and the 9. But what's great about that is that that's what you want. You want to have a general understanding of what people might be saying, a general understanding of what people care about, how they think about things. And so you can use that as a jumping off point to do further research, but you can do that in seconds, and you can get tons of ideas and insights from that you can validate later. But you're your own like market research department just because you've got these tools.
And I found Claude has been really good at generating insights. As the AI to use, Anthropic's Claude has been really impressing me.
Yeah, it's good.
Some of the things I'm looking for. All right, who has another question? Let's do one more question, because we're almost coming up to an hour, and I wanted to go much longer. Anybody? Hannah says thank you. Anybody else have a question?
I have a question.
Okay, awesome.
So my question, could you re-explain what you meant when you said the cash flow funnel like is a translator? Like, could you like go over that again?
Yeah, totally. I'm still showing my screen, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, so
Whoops.
So this funnel is the old way of the most common way of like talking about marketing. And so we did this podcast episode recently that we called Invisible Hands. So I'd encourage you to listen to that if you want to get a lot more information about this. But if you think about this as it's kind of like operating software. It's how because it's so embedded in what we're doing as advertisers we think that's how advertising works. And then we build out our language around that, around advertising. But it's not really how people buy, but it's a useful tool. And we think about things like top of mind awareness, or we build campaigns that are around a customer journey that are like top of mind, top of funnel, mid funnel, bottom funnel, and so on and so forth. And then we have this language like mofu, tofu, and bofu. And so what I mean by it, the translator effect with this cash flow funnel is that it's a different model than you can use as your own operating software on how you explain how advertising works. So the funnel is very advertising or sales centric language. It not at all how customers actually buy. It's not a customer centric lens, and it's not a business centric lens. Whereas the cash flow funnel is. And so the reason why I say it's a translator is because if you start thinking about what this is and you start trying to use it in your day-to-day language, you're instantly translating your language into business speak and not marketing gobbledygook. So things like when you start talking about, well, what's our current and future cash flows look like? That's really critical question for anybody in the business. And like a CFO will get it, and somebody in operations will get it, and then somebody in customer experience will probably get it. Like the people in the distribution and the logistics departments will get it. But if we go in with language like what's the MOFU plan or strategy, like nobody else is going to understand it.
And this model, the 95-5, is different for every industry. If you send me an email, I can send you some things, resources I have on how to figure out. I know I have some charts in different industries. I have in my strategy class, we talk about the 95-5 for a haircut, at the barber shop.
Yeah.
For men. And so there 95-5 is in general terms, but there are specific terms for your industry. So wherever you're going into work, knowing the 95-5 tunnel for that industry will be beneficial to you. And to me, I mean, I love this funnel, the 95-5, because that changed marketing, in my opinion, knowing that 95% of the time they're not in the market for what I'm selling. So I better build a strong brand. When they start thinking about what I'm selling, my brand comes to mind. And then the 5% that are in market, I got to find out how I can pull them in. And typically that's digital marketing and whatever, other things like that. So hopefully that helps. All right, she's shaking her head. I'm going to say, yeah. Well, Mark, I think we solved that one. All right. Well,
If you want to do one more, I got time.
okay. Well, I also was going to say, are you okay with students reaching out to you on LinkedIn and connecting and contacting you? Okay, beautiful. All right. One more question, and then we're going to shut this thing down. Anybody who's got it? Somebody's got to have one more question. They're kind of quiet and shy here, Mark.
That's all good. Yeah, well, like you said,
I got one. Here's one last question. Your advice for how they should get to know AI. Your thoughts? Should they put aside an hour a day? How have you learned it? Because I know you're working with companies on it.
I mean, there's like, honestly, I ask it a lot of questions around how should I use you? Like I've been just doing a lot of that. And then I don't know, the same way you're probably learning anything, there's just a lot of trial and error. Like I've spent weeks trying to build agents and then bombing on it. And then I asked it, like, why does this suck so badly? And they're like, oh, it's because you're trying to do too many things with it. And I'm like, well, why didn't you say it at the beginning? But like, yeah, I would say talk to it. The advice I get most from people that are really good with AI that I know, they always are telling me to just use the speaking portion of it and not type anything. So I would say,
how often a day do you use AI? The question was asked.
I use it all day, every day.
Okay.
But like I dedicate, I don't know, probably an hour a day-ish to trying to build these agents,
Okay,
which I blew up because it wasn't working, and now I got to start from scratch all over again. It's driving me crazy. Like a friend of mine called it wrestling with the robots. I'm like, I get it now. This is so frustrating. Like there's this promise of AI and the death of everything, but the death of everything keeps coming back every year. It feels like. So it's never the death of. It's just it's a new iteration, a new way of doing things. So I would say, like, there's a lot of time before AI takes over anybody's job.
Yeah, and so that's why the importance of knowing the theory behind building a brand, behind situational analysis, strategy, tactics. Knowing those things help you understand when the AI is telling you something that isn't, is not right. So that's
Yeah.
why knowing the theory is key. So I want to thank you, Marc, for doing this for us. It was outstanding, and appreciate you making yourself available on LinkedIn to any students that want to reach out. I highly recommend you connect with Marc. I recommend you tune into his podcast. I'll post up some of my favorite episodes in my D2L so you can tune in. It's only going to get bigger and better. So as you check out of here, say thank you. Say it in the chat box. But as you sign off, let Marc know you appreciated this. And Marc, thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
It was awesome. I see everybody's putting in there. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right. All
Yeah.
right. Brand students, it was my pleasure having you in class. I want to share a piece of good news as we leave. My bladder cancer is not here. The last test showed it did not return. So I got 3 months till the next one. But for now, all good. I got a good summer. So have a good summer break. Reach out to me as well if you need anything. Thanks again, Marc. Appreciated this, and it was a great session. Take care,
Thank you.
everybody. All right. Bye.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you.